Putting in the hours to lead the change for the next generation of pilots in South Africa, Budumelo Kadisi is training to be a flight instructor. The 28-year-old wants to see more black pilots at the national airline. Before South African Airways was grounded in March, more than 70% of the company's 600 pilots were white.
I want to see myself flying for them because obviously I want to fly the national flag carrier from where I'm from. For us upcoming pilots, I think majority of us want to fly the national flag. So I definitely see myself at SAA.
But with the airline under administration, insiders say that ceiling will be even tougher to break through. Mvikeli Zweletu is a pilot. In April, he and 6 other pilots of color wrote an open letter to the business administrators imploring them to save SAA. They say the airline is the only hope for the black majority to gain representation in an industry still dominated by white men 26 years after the end of apartheid.
SAA employs 100% of colored females who are holders of airline transport licenses. If the airline closes, 100% of those females will be out of employment. This is what we are calling going backwards in the racial diversification of the airline that we have been doing.
But the reality is the state-owned airline is broke. It's been operating at a loss since 2011, and plans are going ahead to strip it to the bone and partner with a mix of local and foreign private funders.
The business administrators plan to leave SAA with just 6 aircraft out of the fleet of 44 it had last year. They will also cut 3,700 workers. That's about 80% of the total workforce. They've been waiting since July for the money needed to restructure.
The delays in securing the estimated $650 million of investment have meant that the airline employees have not been paid since March. Unions recently went to SAA headquarters to demand those wages.
These people give of themselves. Some of them for more than 10 years they've been serving this airline. These are not the people that should suffer through job losses for mistakes of incompetent and corrupt ministers and board members.
Workers would have preferred to keep their jobs, but they say they are now just desperate to receive the money that's owed them. Ntshepeng Motema, TRT World, Johannesburg.
Well, for more on this, Christopher Vandome joins us now from London. He's a research fellow with Chatham House's Africa program. Welcome to the program, Christopher. Can I start with the latest midterm budget that's been announced? Because the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni, is really in an unenviable position, isn't he? Because he doesn't have the money to spend his way through this pandemic like other more developed economies. And so he's announced a freeze to public sector wages and possible tax hikes starting next year. Do you think this is the right approach to rein in spending, or should he be going deeper into debt in order to stimulate the economy right now?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's obviously one that's pressing not only on his mind, but on the entire nation of South Africa. And look, this is a country that even before the pandemic, suffered a grave debt crisis. On the eve of the pandemic lockdown, Moody's joined Fitch and Standard & Poor's in giving South Africa a sub-investment grade rating. In April, the government did pump 500 billion rand into the economy, the equivalent of 10% of GDP, coming from mixed funding sources. So they've already done a lot in terms of putting money in. And over the course of the pandemic, around 22 million people, or half of the population, have received some form of cash grant from the government. So there's been a lot going on. But what we're seeing today, as you show in that footage and as your question states, this is a government that's being pulled in 2 different directions. There's one that's saying there needs to be fiscal discipline, and there's one that's saying, look, this is a country that needs economic transformation. And so on the public sector wage freeze, you've got the government now pitting itself against the trades unions, who have already taken the government to court over reneging on a deal for increased public sector wages. And on the same at the same time, you've got a state-owned enterprise like South African Airways that they're desperately trying to find money to keep in operation. The ANC party had already made a commitment to that. But at the same time, this is being delivered by a finance minister who has personally stated in the past that he wouldn't be putting any of his personal money into the airline if he was asked.
That's right.
So there's a lot of tightening of the fiscus in this statement, but there's a lot of ideological questions around what role should the state play in the economy that remain unanswered.
Let's talk more about South African Airways, because as you say, Tito Mboweni in the past has said that it is a luxury that the state simply cannot afford. But as we heard in Ntshepeng's story there, it does provide jobs and a lifeline to many South Africans, including those pilots of colour who are otherwise shut out of other job opportunities in other airlines. So what should the South African state be doing here? Should it continue to prop up South African Airways, or is it fast approaching a point at which it simply must let go of it?
Well, this is an ideological debate within the government. The party has put its commitment to it, and there are figures within the government pulling in opposite directions. You've got Praveen Gordhan in the Ministry of Public Works in favour of it, and you've got Tito Mboweni pulling against it. But it comes back to this central question that's bigger than SAA itself, which is what role is the government intending to play in the economy? Now, going forward, this midterm budget statement comes 2 weeks after President Ramaphosa put his own recovery plan to the country. Within that recovery plan, you see for the first time, a economic plan coming out of this administration that's actually relatively coherent, and they're getting a sense of what they want to achieve. And it's also built on an engagement with business and with the public sector through NEDLAC, the National Economic Development and Labour Council, as well as building on this social compact between unions, business, labour. How is everybody going to be involved in this economy going forward? But critically, they still haven't answered this question of what role for their SOEs. How much money are they prepared to put in? And it's not something that is for me to answer. That's something that the government needs to answer. But it's also something that international investors and the markets are desperate to see an answer on this question, because it comes to the very basis of how sustainable is South Africa's debt position going forward. And at the moment, there's still a lot of uncertainty.
It sure is. Christopher Vandome from Chatham House in London, thanks again for joining us on the program.